Gamers, this is going to be the last video I ever upload in Age of Empires 4 for 2023. Obviously, we continue 2024. But we're doing emergency tier list. It's emergently urgent, aka emergency tier list. Why? Because the year's about to end and we gotta get the very last tier list out there. So, as you guys know, we've received like the last patch whenever it was, and since then it's been like a month and a half, and I am sure we're gonna have new patches in the future, and I'm expecting a patch because the devs are probably on the holiday right now, or holidays over Christmas and all that. I'm expecting a patch to be like late January, early February. I don't have the dates or anything, but that would kind of make sense because there's some things that probably should get addressed. With that being said, I am making warning. This Civ tier list is for top level gameplay, and that is my opinion as well. Now, if you want me to do a quick gold league tier list, I can do that too. Basically, S tier is whatever you're not playing, and then D tier is the one Civ that you are playing. So there you go. That's the gold Civ tier list. And now let's get into the Civ tier list. The number one Civ right now, in my opinion, is probably Jushi's Legacy. Now, there was a tournament recently, about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever. And I actually didn't play Jushi's Legacy at all. And the reason I didn't play it, or I played it like maybe a game or two, but I didn't play it too much, even though it was never banned against me, is because I just didn't get to practice it too much. But this Civ will probably be receiving nerfs. Like, I cannot see the world where this Civ does not get nerfs, because the Song Dynasty right now for Jushi's Legacy is just busted as hell. And yeah, it just needs nerfs. I don't know what else to say. The second civilization we'll be talking about is one of my favorite civs, actually. It's going to be Delhi. Delhi, A tier. I love Delhi. Delhi can be played on hybrid maps. Delhi can be played on open maps, whatever maps, pretty much every map. And it's a really strong civ. It's probably the strongest or one of the strongest feudal civs overall. Agazi Raiders are really strong. The pressure that they're able to put out is crazy. And most of the games with Delhi end pretty quickly because of the sacred sites, and you either get to control the sacred sites and keep them and just trade better than your opponent, or you get wrecked and go next. So it's a great civ. It's a great aggro civ. I love it. Delhi has been played the same for a while now, and I think it's still good, and nothing's really changed. It's a really good civ, and it's very often used in tournaments by every top pro player. The next civ we'll be talking about is going to be Abbasid. Now, Abbasid is one of the worst civs, not because the civ isn't strong at the top level, not because of the units not being good, because obviously the composite bow archers are insane still. It almost feels like wrong putting it in D tier, because again, I don't think it's a bad civ in any league. If I was making a civ tier list for like any league, I would probably put it in B tier. But at the top level, I'm talking like tournament level play, I would say Abbasid is D tier because, number one, TC nerf, less range, less villagers being able to put into the TC, which means that Abbasid cannot just put TCs on far out food, because then it's just going to get absolutely destroyed, and that's kind of how you play Abbasid on 2 TC. And then another reason why Abbasid is just not that good on top level is because the top level gameplay is extremely aggressive, whether that's with castle rushing into knight spamming and just going for it, or feudal all-ins. That's kind of the meta, and it has been meta for a moment, and well, Abbasid cannot do either of those very well. And because of that, even if you go 2 TC and then you go into castle, your castle age up is late, and it always feels like, not always feels like, it is like that. You are always defending, and being the aggressor at the top level is always better. You basically, if you're defending, you can't really make mistakes. if you're the one attacking, you can make mistakes because you are the one that decides when to attack, when to pull back, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to say Abbasid is D tier. And again, not because of the Civ strength necessarily. If I was playing in like low Conquer 3 or even mid Conquer 3, I'd probably put it at B tier. But at the top level, it's very, very hard to get out of that feudal age without being behind. The next Civ we'll be talking about is going to be let's see. I'm gonna go with Mongol. I think that's an easy one. Mongol is a Civ that actually received the most bans in the tournament. Now, I don't think it's like the most overpowered because of that. I think Mongol is just incredibly oppressive on hybrid maps, and that's why it has received so many bans. Mongol on land maps is okay, it is playable, but at the top level, we don't see it that often on maps like Dry Arabia or like Hidden Valley or something. It's usually almost exclusively picked on like Canal or Golden Heights, you know, maps like that, where Mongol can put pressure in Dark Age and then kind of scale from then on out. I am going to try to kind of include every map, as in like hybrid maps and land maps. And if a Civ is like bad on a hybrid map or something, or land map, I will mention it, just so you guys know. The next Civ I'll be talking about is going to be, let's do Byzantines. I think Byzantines is very similar to Abbasid, very similar situation. And I think Byzantines, again, are not a bad Civ. They just take a pretty long time to get started. But once they get started, they're incredibly strong, especially in Imperial. But I think to get to that point is pretty difficult. And I do think that Byzantines will most likely be receiving buffs in the future. But again, the whole cistern system is cool and all, and that's very nice. But the problem is, by the time you set all that up, the opponent is either already in castle, or the opponent already has a second TC, or the opponent is harassing you to death, and I feel like it's just a bit too slow. Like I said, very similar to Abbasid, but once it takes off, it's pretty decent. The next Civ we'll be talking about, let's see, is going to be, we'll do China. China is an alright Civ. Maybe it's a B tier actually, I'm not sure. We'll keep it here for now. I think China is an alright Civ, but again, it suffers from the same problem as Abbasid and Byzantines, except it's a little bit better because the units are a lot stronger, specifically Zuginu, because even if the opponent rushes castle, you can still kill your opponents with Zuginu. Now, the difference between China and Jushi's Legacy is there's only one major difference why one is good and one isn't, and that's because the Song Dynasty of Jushi's Legacy is OP and is going to get nerfed for sure. What it does is reduces the cost of your non-military buildings by 40%, and it allows you basically to go for a sheep, then your closed berries, maybe your first deer pack, and then you can ignore the map completely and just transition to farms. And China can kind of do that, but it is a lot more expensive, so it is not as easy to do something like that. I do think that China, you know, it's like Byzantines and Abbasid. If you get out of feudal while not being behind, you're going to be in a great spot. But at the top level, we didn't actually see a lot of China being played at all. On land maps, I think almost exclusively saw China on 4 lakes, if I'm not mistaken. And on maps like 4 lakes or maps where it's very easy to boom, China is probably like S tier, right? But in general, I'm talking like Dry Arabia, Canal, Golden Heights, maps like those. China, you know, could use some help. Actually, I'm probably going to put it like that, because the next Civ, sadly, is going to be HRE, and HRE, I don't think is that good. Why is HRE not that good? Well, because all the Civs that are good counter HRE in a way, or have ways to deal with HRE, I should say. HRE can't fight in feudal. Still, I'm still hoping for some kind of buff that's going to help them with that, but they still can't fight in feudal. 2 TC HRE is not a thing anymore. People don't really do it anymore, because if you go 2 TC HRE and your opponent all-ins you, you're probably going to die. And then if you go 1 TC HRE and fight, your units are not as good. You don't have anything super unique to help you out there. And then if you do rush castle, for example, against Delhi or Jushi's Legacy or any of the knight civs, they can actually kill you while they're in feudal and you're in castle, because your economy will run out and you cannot go on the map, which means you're going to have to go farms, which slows down your unit production, and you simply don't have enough units. But similar to China, HRE has a lot of good maps in tournaments where you can play them. Maps like Four Lakes or some kind of map like where you can boom. I played HRE 4 times I think in the tournament, and I played it on Prairie. On Prairie it's quite good. So depending on the map, HRE can be used, but in general, no bueno. Next civ that I'll be talking about is going to be it's going to be Jeanne d'Arc. Jeanne d'Arc, I'm going to put it in A tier. I think it's pretty good, pretty decent. It fits the meta, which is the aggression. And obviously, if you play her on the maps that she's supposed to be played on, which is like Dry Arabia, maps that are open. I'm trying to think what other ladder maps there are, and I can't think of any. If you play her on like Dry Arabia, Cliffside, Golden Pit Gorge, or Himayama, those maps are usually played, with aggressive civs. So if you pick Jeanne d'Arc onto those maps, and you're gonna face like, French, English, Delhi, Mongol, and that's kind of the civs that you want to run into, so you can fight and get XP. Maybe not English, but you kind of get the point. So it has pretty good success there, but it does have some counters. So yeah, overall, pretty good civ. The next civ we'll be talking about is Malian, and Malian has received a nerf recently, but it's like super small nerf. It's like you get 3 food less per minute per cow, which is like 60 food per minute less. I mean, it's a nerf, but it's not something like that made them unplayable. And I think that Malians is still a top tier civ. It's still getting picked a lot in the tournaments. It's still played a lot, so Malians. Next civ we'll be talking about is going to be English. I'm going to put in B tier. I think English is not as bad as HRE, not as bad as Abbasid or Byzantines, but it's not up there. It's all right, but it has its problems. One thing that you might be noticing, the civs that are at the top, except Jushi's Legacy, are cavalry civs. And cavalry is just a lot better way to play Aoe4 at the top level. You have mobility, you can harass, you can do a lot of stuff. And English is kind of like, it's slower civ, and it's a lot easier to counterattack, it's a lot easier to harass. But English does have some strong maps where longbows are really, really good. For example, one of the maps where English is pretty good is Himayama, where you can pull like 2 villagers and kill the enemy's villager making a dock, and then make dock yourself. You can do a bunch of stuff like that. It can like kind of play a bit more defensive against some of the civs and go a little bit later into the game. Or you can also be super, super aggressive and have good matchups into some of the civs. But in general, I would not say that, it's like, oh, if I get English versus Delhi, I'm going to get a free win. Like, Delhi's pretty good against English. Malian's pretty good against English. So, yeah, it's all right. Doesn't have any major advantages right now in the meta, but it is all right. The next civ we'll be talking about is going to be it's going to be Ottoman. Ottoman, also A tier. Very, very strong civ. Very strong on hybrid maps. Very strong on one-on-one maps. Or like one-on-one land maps, sorry. It's strong on Dry Arabia. It actually does really well into these other civs. Maybe not into Delhi, but it does really well into these other civs that are at the top level. It can produce absurd amount of units. And we've also seen not just a good old Ottoman where you're spamming units in feudal, but we've also seen a lot of Castle Rush builds from Ottoman and a lot of 2TC builds from Ottoman too that I think are pretty good as well. So, thumbs up. Next one we'll be talking about is going to be Rus. I think Rus is a pretty good civ. It definitely has lost its power. It feels wrong to put it here. I think Rus is still a strong civ, a top tier civ. It's getting picked all the time. But in general, I think that it has lost its power. There was a long period where Rus was S tier, and I just don't see it S tier anymore. I don't know if it's just people learning how to play against it, or other civs got buffed or whatever, but I don't feel like, oh, I'm playing against Russo, like I'm dead kind of thing. Like I feel like, yeah, it's strong, but there are ways to go about it and to play against it. The next civ we'll be talking about is going to be French. So I've talked about this on my stream. This is a problem with French. French is not played on water. It's not played on hybrid maps. It might be a B tier, but it might be a C tier. I'm gonna think a little bit. This is the problem with French. It doesn't get played on water maps because it's not good. And then the only other options you can play French are maps like Cliffside, Dry Arabia, maybe Golden Pit, Gorge, maybe Himeyama. Now, why is this a problem? Well, the problem is not actually with the civ strength. The problem is the civs that are played on those maps are very good against French. I would say that French versus Delhi, I think it's a decent matchup for French. French versus Mongol, I personally dislike that matchup from French point of view. French versus Jeanne d'Arc, I feel like, I don't know if it's a 50-50, but I think it can go either way. French versus Malian, it is a disaster for French. French versus Ottoman is a disaster for French. And I think French versus Rus is not a disaster for French, but it's pretty bad for French. And these are the civs that get played on those open maps. So it feels like the civs that you do counter as French are either not played that much anymore, or they're not just played on those maps. Because there was a time in Aoe4 where, you know, you were still playing HRE on Dry Arabia, or you would play China on Dry Arabia, or Abbasid or Dry Arabia. But now we have so many civs, and we have so many different maps, that it's like, if you have Lipan in the map pool, you're not going to play, you know, French there, necessarily. You're going to play French on, like, maybe Dry Arabia, right? Or you're not going to play HRE on Lipany like once back in the day we used to play, because there's like Holy Island, there's Prairie, there's, you know, mountain clearing, and that's where you want to use HRE. So the maps became a lot more specialized into where they're good. And the problem is, once the dust settles, every tournament we have about 3 or 4 land maps, and then on those land maps you can play like 10 civs. And the few civs that French does really well are not played on those maps. And most of the civs that are played are really good against French. So if you had a tournament where it was like, I don't know, like 3 bands, and then it's a best of 7 and you get to pick 7 civs, I think French would see a lot of play on those maps. But it's just people are putting priority on some of the other civs currently, which I don't think makes French too good for that reason. And I do think it's like, just like Abbasid, HRE, and Byzantines suffer from the meta. I would say that the meta is actually pretty good for French, but the way that maps work out is not working out for French, if that makes sense. So, yeah. OOTD. Now, OOTD, I have played it quite a bit, and this is the one civ where I would say will potentially increase in my next tier list in January. I'm going to put OOTD in B tier, but I think OOTD has a lot of potential, and I've played OOTD quite a bit, and I had really good win rate with it. Like, really good win rate with it. And I think as OOTD is figured out more, because it is a very simple civ, but at the top level, it is very difficult to play because you have so few units, and your units are so valuable. You cannot make mistakes. You cannot lose villagers. You cannot lose horsemen. And because you have less units, it's a lot harder to split your armies properly. But I do see, like, if I make another civ tier list in January, I do see myself putting OOTD into A tier. No joke. I think it's a really good civ if you get certain things done the right way. I think you can do really well. So I'm super excited. OOTD is probably my favorite civ right now to play. Next civ we'll be talking about is Japanese. I'm going to put Japanese into B tier, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think Japanese is either S tier or C tier, in my opinion. And that depends on which map you're playing it on. If you're playing Japanese on a hybrid map, it is S tier. It is with Mongol, the strongest civ on the hybrid map by far. It's not even close. And Japanese actually received, I think, second most bans in the tournament because of the hybrid maps. But Japanese on land maps, not very good. But I will say, just like OTD, you know, I've been experimenting a little bit, and I was doing the 1 TC Castle Rush into Mounted Samurai, and I found that build to be very, very strong, surprisingly, even on land maps. So I was one of those people who thought, yeah, Japanese on land maps is shit, but on water maps it's really good. And now I'm changing my mind a little bit. I think Japanese has a lot of potential, especially with the Castle Rush build that I've been doing. And I think that OTD and Japanese have a chance to go up in my ranks, and maybe we'll boop some of the top civs down. So yeah, I think the funny thing is Japanese overall I think has a pretty low win rate, and that might cause the devs to actually buff Japanese. And if that happens, I think Japanese is definitely going to be an A tier civ in the you know, in the next civ tier list if it comes out after the patch. Now, Ayyubid has been played quite a lot in tournaments, and I don't really know what to think about it. I think this civ is the biggest question mark to me. There is no way that this civ will not get some big changes in the next patch, because there's just a lot of weird stuff around this civ. There's some wings that are useless. There's some wings that are too OP. So their units are all right, but just the aging up and their wings are either too strong or too weak. And I feel like there's just no middle ground with them. And the only build that I've had decent success with Ayyubids was the 1 TC Castle Rush. You can start Castle Age up at 530 and finish it at like 640. Or 520 and then age up at 630, which is insanely strong. But I feel like it's very one-dimensional. Like, I feel like when you age up with them to castle, it's not like Japanese where I can do like 4 different things and I can get a second TC and I can make like, you know, this unit and this unit and that unit. With Ayyubids, it's like, okay, you go Camel Lancers into Archers. It's very like, I don't need to even scout my opponent to know what they're doing kind of thing. And because of that, I do think it's a strong civ right now. Like, in terms of strength of the build, of that one build, I would put it in A tier. But overall, as a civ, I feel like it doesn't have a lot to offer right now, because there's so many different options, and I always describe it as like, you know, if Abbasid is like point A to B, Ayyubid can be like A to B to C to A to B to C to D. You know, it can like, there's so many wing options that you can go for. And like, you can go military into, you know, one of the 2 culture wings. You can go economy wing into military wing. You can go eco into culture wing. You can go trade wing. And there's so many options that I feel like is probably the least explored and figured out civ. And on top of that, I do think we're going to see changes with it. So for now, I'm going to put it in a B tier. Realistically, strength-wise, it's probably A tier, but it's pretty one-dimensional. So I'm going to put it into B tier. And that's it. I think that's my civ tier list. I'm liking what I'm seeing. I think I'm satisfied with it. And I can definitely see, like, Jushi will most likely get nerfed. I cannot see them not getting nerfed. They're probably going to get nerfed. I can see OTD or Japanese getting some buffs. Ayyubids getting some major changes. Jeanne d'Arc is always a question mark what the devs are going to do with it. And I think Byzantines are definitely going to get buffs too. Perhaps even Abbasid, because like I said, Abbasid is just a good civ, but just very, very slow. And hopefully, one day, we're going to get HRE buffs in Feudal Age where they're not terrible to fight with. But who knows? Who knows? Anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. This video should be uploaded on the 31st. So Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you have a great 2024. Check me out on Twitch. I'm probably live right now in the new year. Thank you. I appreciate all the watch time, all the views, all the comments, even the dented ones. I'm very happy and grateful you guys have been watching me for 2 years now. 2 years and a bit in Aoe4. So thank you so much for another great year. And I will see you boys in 2024. YouTube gamers, have a good one. Twitch gamers, let's keep going.